Yeah, on.
Two twins. Yeah. Two twins and an album. Do it, T. T's doing a little shimmy over there across the Zoom here.
I thought I'd get a little jiggy with it there. A little jiggy with it. Did you notice I was doing kind of the Bobby Brown My Prerogative hump?
There were some pelvic thrusts.
By the way, that hump thing he did toward the end of the My Prerogative video, remember that one?
Oh yeah.
Was frightening.
Yeah, it was sort of inhuman. Yeah.
Were those camera tricks or was that real? I mean, well, look, the fact that he had the baggy, like those big baggy pants on and still was able to generate that kind of inertia, it was very frightening.
I think maybe now we know why Whitney was able to put up with all of his crazy antics, you know?
Or was she? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Welcome to episode 34 here on Two Twins and an Album. Nubs and T with you here. Checking in from the dead of winter from where we reside here in the great north. Lots of snow on the ground, but a good time to, listen to albums, don't you think, T? I mean, winter is a good time to catch up on music. There's no shows to go to because of the pandemic, so...
Listen, don't give me all this winter crap, okay? You've been in Florida for like the last 2 weeks-ish. And God bless you. But listen, I've been the one truly plowing through this winter. And I believe like 72 hours ago, you were like laying by the pool, with a White Claw. So, let's not get on the air here and start talking about the dead and depression of winter here.
If I could just make one correction, I was by the pool actually with 2 White Claws, not one. So just for the record. But yes, this is all true. And T, tonight here on episode 34, let's talk a little bit about one-hit wonders. Now, one thing I wonder about this term, first of all, it was a term that like bothered me even when I was young, like tugged at my heartstrings a little bit because I always felt sorry for artists who were thrust into that category because I always thought it was a bit insulting. It's like, oh, like a one-hit wonder. That means they only had one hit. And I don't know, it just kind of bothered me, but it also created some intrigue because I always thought, well, they had one hit. They must have been okay. I wonder what else is out there. But T, I wonder here in 2021, is one-hit wonder even possible anymore? I mean, is there really even such a thing as hits, or is there the cycle of artists and the cycle of music and content is so fast now? I don't even know if one hit wonder is ever going to be a thing. So is that a term that we kind of grew up with as Generation Xers, but young kids will never hear or use that term? Or what do you think?
Probably because, the whole intent of the term is basically saying these guys had other songs. In most cases, these guys had albums with more songs, but only one really broke through. And they're really only known or renowned for that one tune. Now, everything is so singles based that I'm not sure. I think if you come out and just have one famous song, you're just that band that had that one famous single, and there's a lot of those. And people put it on their playlist and they're just happy. Whereas before it was kind of like, wow, this band put out either one album or multiple albums and had all these, this catalog of all these songs, but only one, kind of really hit the mainstream or broke through. And so, yeah, I don't think it's as dramatic of a kind of notation as it was back around that time. What's been really interesting, kind of to your point about, is it a bad rap? Is it not? Has been kind of over the years to see how various artists have responded to being quote unquote one hit wonders, because many of them embrace it. It's kind of like, this is my song. This is what I'm known for. How many people wish that they could go through a music career and be famous and renowned for even just one song, and they love it, and they embrace it. And then there are a lot of people that you can tell are dissatisfied or wish they could have had more than one hit, and sort of are offended by the notoriety of being in this category. So that's kind of interesting. And a lot of these nostalgia festivals, and particularly we're talking about 80s band tonight, you see a lot of that going on. Some of these acts get up and they play 5 songs and they play the moneymaker, and that's it. And they have a very good time and they make a very good living, by doing so. There are truly, bands that have made careers out of one song. And, shoot, you and I, Nubs, have composed some music over the years. And I mean, man, wouldn't you be happy to just have one that made it, if you will? So, it's funny. You always get into the, what are artists satisfied with and what are they dissatisfied with? But that's been kind of part of the fun of that whole one hit wonder sort of genre over time, is to see how the artists kind of respond to it.
It's a good perspective. And, sometimes we only think of these things as fans, we don't think about the way the artists interpret that. And you're right, it can go either direction. Tonight, we really look at, in my opinion, one of the great injustices of the term one hit wonder, really one of 2 that stand out to me. And one of them is the band and album that we'll look at tonight. And the other is probably, again, I talk about the way that term kind of tugged at my younger heartstrings. One day I was in one of our local record shops and was just sort of in that curious mood where it was like, maybe I'll buy something today that's a little abnormal, right? And so kind of just through the normal searches, I went into the Gary Newman area. And at this time, I only knew him for Cars. And Gary Newman in America was without question considered a one-hit wonder. Well, I bought a double disc import, the best of Gary Newman, just out of pure curiosity, because I'm like, listen, I really like the song Cars. I love the sound. And if he has a best of that's a European import, dude must have done a few more things somewhere else. And I bought that collection and just didn't listen to anything else for 3 months. I just became obsessively interested in Newman, all because of the curiosity of the one hit wonder piece. And so some listeners, I think, get into it and they want to go to the Nostalgia Festival and just hear the song or put that song on their playlist and hear it over and over again. For me, there was always a deeper curiosity of, man, what else is out there? What does the rest of the album sound like? And what do the other albums sound like? And what is the album before and the one after? How did they connect? And so, to me, it opened up more curiosity than anything else. And I quickly also realized that one hit wonder is sort of, it's going to sound a little like I'm so worldly, which, I'm not, but it does seem like a sort of American thing. We say that about an artist like Gary Newman. Well, Gary Newman had a ton of hits and, an incredible amount of notoriety overseas, but in America, he's like a one hit wonder. So that's one that stands out to me. Is there any discovery that you've made based on the one hit wonder status?
Oh, there's been a lot. I mean, I think that you picked a perfect example, because now, and you introduced me to Newman heavily, but now it's just hilarious to think of Gary Newman as a one hit wonder, because you learn about Two-Way Army and you learn about not just this multi-decade solo career, but this multi-genre solo career of things that have always been synth-based to an extent. But, he has tackled 5 or 6, unique and pretty differentiated genres of music in throughout different albums within his catalog in different eras. So it's you start learning about this, and when you bring him up and people say that he's the Cars guy, it's kind of hilarious. It's it's just funny to think that they're, without doing that sort of deep dive, that you could very easily think that. And for people that think that, it's not like they're stupid. They just haven't, to your point, sort of taken the time to, kind of jump into it. But, there are some that it does lead you down a little bit of a nice, pleasurable sort of rabbit hole where you end up learning a lot about the deeper catalog or sort of the material beyond what they're famous for. And that can be awesome. But, listen, there are plenty too where that one song was their one hit for a reason, and you want to appreciate and enjoy what they did further than that. And you get to the end, it's like, yep, I pretty much only like that one song they did too, and that happens as well. So, not every one hit wonder is a Gary Newman, but there are plenty that deserve a deeper dive. And you brought up a very good example of one.
Well, deeper dive is what we will do. And it'll be for our listeners who see A Flock of Seagulls as a one-hit wonder. Hopefully it leads to a discovery of this tremendous work that is the debut album. And those who are already familiar with it might enjoy kind of the top to bottom look at it and try and find some perspective for this particular album from this quote unquote one hit wonder. But before we get into one hit wonders and all that good stuff and flocks of seagulls and things
and crazy hair, crazy swoopy hair.
Yeah.
That's part
we'll talk
of
about
this.
The hair.
Sure.
Yeah. You can't talk about this band without talking about the hair. But before we get into crazy swoopy hair, T, let's take things around and around and figure out what you've been listening to. Let's go round and round. T, 3 albums that have been spinning around for you.
Well, the first, I kind of tend to stay away from compilations within Round and Round, but been listening to a lot of old Cure stuff. And, the Standing on a Beach, which was the cassette, I believe, format, maybe LP as well. And then it was called Staring at the Sea when it came out on CD. So it's kind of like the same compilation with 2 different titles. Is just a glorious way to revisit that really kind of early era of the Cure. Always good every now and again to go back and get that. They did some really good stuff, obviously, toward the middle of their career. And even some of the stuff through the 90s was okay.
I got to check with the judges real quick to make sure that compilation can be included. Hold on, let me check.
Oh, sure.
Okay, turns out two compilations are allowed. The Cure, Standing on the Beach, so you're lucky. The other one is Tom Petty Greatest Hits.
Oh,
so
okay.
I think
okay, fair.
Yeah. Those can be.
I mean, that was a tough. That was down to the wire.
It was down to the wire. Yeah, there's big discussion going on. I figure the judges.
Yeah, I'm glad that the judges ruled in favor because otherwise I think I would just have to quit. You'd be on your own the rest of the episode. So
you'd be one twin in an album.
That's right,
that's not double the fun, if you will.
No, exactly. The second is an album, and this is by the group Sparks that we have spoken of before. And, you talk about multi-genre and a multi-decade career. These guys are working on like their 26th album. This is one from the early 80s. This is music you can dance to. And this is when they got into synth, a sort of a poppy, synthy, up-tempo kind of sound, which really, I really like this record. I think it's one of their best. And the title track has emerged as one of my favorite songs of the 80s. I mean, music that you can dance to is a just complete jam. And also featured very, very nicely during the movie Rad, during the bicycle boogie at the dance, when Crew Jones and the chick from Full House get out there and do some weird kind of dance moves with their bikes. I mean, it's pretty amazing as the Reynolds twins, watch on. And I mean,
is that the slow motion sequence?
So they come out and, music that you can dance to is when the Reynolds twins start doing their coordinated dance and all that. And then Crew Jones comes in with his bike and just when not sure who his bicycle dance partner is going to be, all of a sudden the chick from Full House rolls in. What's her name?
Mary Kate?
No, she was Uncle Jesse's wife or girlfriend.
The hot one? Yeah. I don't know, but those are the hot chick.
Isn't she the one that just got busted for like getting her kids into college? Like Lori Loughlin.
Lori Loughlin is Uncle Jesse's girlfriend.
Yeah, it's her.
Okay.
Isn't she? Is she in jail? Wasn't she one of those that did the?
She got out, but yeah, she was convicted of that scandal with the colleges. Yes.
Let's see. Just doing a little quick research here. She went to jail for 2 months in October of 2020. It's kind of funny. So then they come out and in slow motion, that's when Send Me an Angel is actually playing. But really incredible scene from the movie Rad. I
don't know whether I'm incredibly impressed at your detailed knowledge of Rad or a little bit concerned. It might be
a quality film. And let's not forget also Talia Shore, who plays Crew Jones's mom. And
yes.
May I say that Talia was in one of her more hot sort of eras at the time. Kind of probably around that Rocky 3 Rad era where she was real hot. So give it up for Adrian Balboa on that one. And anything else on Sparks? I think
we covered a lot of ground.
We sure did. And then the third one is by Kanye, who's been in the news lately. He's going to be a free agent here on the market, I suppose is the word from Camp West. And his record, The Life of Pablo, which is probably my favorite Kanye recording if I had to pick one. So what is Round and Round for you, Nub?
Start with a new album. And this is the new album from Steven Wilson, The Future Bites, which was originally going to come out. Gosh, when was it? Several months ago. He delayed it. Maybe perhaps thinking that things would sort of normalize, and finally released it earlier this month. And it's pretty interesting. It's kind of poppy and lots of catchy stuff, a ton of electronics, really stripped down, nothing like the prog rock of Porcupine Tree and the early Steven Wilson stuff. But anything he does is worth it and worthy of support. And I'll spend some more time with it and check it out. Also, another new album, and just to echo your choice from last week, and that is the new album from Foo Fighters. Which,
do you have any?
I don't know, T.
I'm still digging in. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, my thoughts are that I don't think it's that good. I mean, I'm still giving it a shot, but right now it doesn't feel like I would put it in that upper tier of Foo Fighters album. But still very worthy of checking out, and I look forward to a deeper experience with it. But for now, I'm not like crazy about it, but we'll keep rocking out with it. We'll give those guys a shot.
Sometimes with them, you dig into the album. Well, I guess, I don't know. They're all album tracks now. I'm not sure if any have been radio cuts, but sometimes with them, you dig into the album tracks over time and start to like it more.
Yeah, exactly. And then third, I'm going with the debut album from Mike and the Mechanics from 1985. And this is Mike Rutherford from Genesis, not his solo debut, but the debut of this particular band. And this is a really strong debut album. It's got All I Need Is a Miracle and Silent Running. And this is like a real peak time for all the members of Genesis. They were all kind of firing on all cylinders, whether it be together or solo. And so that first Mike and the Mechanics album is something I visit from time to time, and still very much enjoy.
He's also the guitar player for Roachford. So Roachford, which we've discussed before.
We certainly have. So as we discussed at the opening, we'll really get into this really fascinating debut album from this group that, again, is just pigeonholed into this one-hit wonder thing, and people seem to talk more about the hair than the music. But here in episode 34, let's really get into the music.
Well, the hair was pretty amazing. I mean, I understand we probably should focus on the record, but it was good hair.
Yeah, it was pretty strong hair. There's no doubt. But let's learn more about A Flock of Seagulls in this wonderful debut as we get into the nerdy deeds done dirt cheap.
You want some dirty deeds? Yeah. You want some dirty deeds?
All right, A Flock of Seagulls debut album, which is called A Flock of Seagulls, was released on April 30th of 1982. It was on Jive Records. The album was produced by Mike Howlett, who actually has a pretty strong distinction in my nerdy prog rock world. He was the bass guitarist for a band called Gong, which was a really influential, very avant-garde, kind of, important part of the prog scene of the mid 70s, but sort of overlooked and didn't make a lot of noise in the US, but certainly was pretty notable in that scene. Mike Hallett was the bass player for that group, and he produced this album with the exception of one song, and that is Telecommunication, which was produced by the great Bill Nelson, who was the guitarist for Bebop Deluxe and went on to have a pretty reputable solo career and production career. And Bill Nelson produced Telecommunication, but Mike Hallett produced the rest of the album. A Flock of Seagulls is made up of, the original lineup is really the kind of cherished phase of A Flock of Seagulls, and it didn't last very long. They had some personnel changes pretty early on. And now if you go see the band, it's basically Mike Score and then a bunch of other guys that you've certainly never heard of, and they seem to change rapidly because he's kind of taken the thing over. But the original lineup is Mike Score on vocals and keyboards, and he played a little guitar on this album. Guitarist Paul Reynolds, and we'll talk a lot about Paul Reynolds and what he brought to the table on all guitars and background vocals. Frank Maudsley was the bass player, some singing as well. And then Ali Score, the brother of Mike Score, played drums and percussion on the album. So once again, that's sort of the original lineup of this band. In terms of the success of the album, it did very well. And it was obviously boosted by a huge hit single in I Ran So Far Away. The charting singles included I Ran, Telecommunication, and Space Age Love Song. The album did very well in terms of worldwide charts. It was top 10 in Canada and New Zealand, and also in the US. It did hit number 10 on the weekly charts. And on the year-end chart, it was number 63 on the 1982 year-end chart for Billboard. So very successful album. It sold several hundreds of thousands of copies all over, and it was certified gold in the United States for sales of 500,000 and more. So, maybe not the ultimate smash. It wasn't like Thriller-esque or anything like that, but certainly this record did very, very well. And that was the thing about this one-hit wonder thing, T, is, if you found yourself being a one-hit wonder in the 80s, you still were able to sell a ton of albums. This is before CD and cassette singles. Yes, they had 45s, and I'm sure that I Ran did very well in that way, but people did go out and buy the album if they liked one of the songs. And this album is a good example of that in terms of its commercial success, isn't it?
Yeah, no question. And a lot of critical success too. I mean, one of the things that I didn't know before kind of digging into this was the production technique that, and I give the band credit for this too, in addition to their, production personnel. But, a lot of this, and you saw it on even the album that followed, a lot of this kind of wall of sound-ish type approach. And even Phil Spector himself, who, in addition to like murdering people, spent a little bit of time establishing himself as, whether we like it or not, one of the most incredible producers ever.
On the side, he was into that.
Yeah. Within, I'm talking about the history of music here. He gave this album a ton of praise from a production standpoint. Very proactive, outward praise for the sound and the style and the production technique. And I found that very interesting. But yeah, it's when you learn a little bit more about this debut, you kind of see that this was certainly something. And again, I don't know that this element made it all the way to the US here, but you see that there was kind of more to it. And in the way that it was viewed critically, we certainly knew that it was a commercial success, and it all makes it very interesting.
Phil Spector called it phenomenal. That was the exact word that he used. And another huge thing for the band was Robert Christo, who's considered one of the most kind of grouchy music critics, which it tends to be, in the lot of music critics, you kind of find a little bit of pessimism, and they're critics, right? But he gave the album a really strong review, and that was sort of surprising to many, and it really gave the record a ton of credibility. And the other thing that boosted the album tremendously, obviously, was A Flock of Seagulls won a Grammy in 1983 for Best Rock Instrumental Performance for DNA. And we'll talk about that when we get to the song. So lots of critical praise, good commercial success. The band actually formed in a relatively organic way. Mike Score, certainly being the leader of it, but he was actually, ironically, and maybe not super ironically, he was working as a hairdresser. And the band really formed once they got Paul Reynolds in at guitar. They started rehearsing in a room above Mike Score's hairdressing salon. And so it's always kind of this interesting thing that hair became such a huge part of the band's image. And Mike Score was a hairdresser, and the band first rehearsed above.
You can't make this stuff up, can you?
Yeah, exactly. So, in 1982 and into 83 was certainly a gigantic year for bands like A Flock of Seagulls. We've talked about the year 1983 previously, and what a important year it was in music, and MTV was coming along. And so the video was, hugely essential in terms of the really fast rise of this group. And let's say also kind of the quick decline of the band as well. And so, T, are you ready to get into A Flock of Seagulls?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm always down for some 80s, always.
Yeah, totally.
So, yeah, let's roll.
Totally. Well, before we do that, T, let's hear about your A Flock of Seagulls experience, whatever it may be, as we get into our wonders. All right, T, how did you join the flock, if you will?
My main story with these guys, other than, obviously, Iran was featured prominently on my famous 80s tape. But it was actually kind of funny. I didn't really discover, this band or the song Iran until kind of later. I think I was maybe in like junior high school or something. It was definitely in the 90s. It was not at the time, because this wasn't a super prominent, video hit in the US. And it probably was a decent radio hit here. Obviously it was, it was a big song, but so I don't really remember them at all during their 80s heyday. But one of the things that was kind of funny is, and I think it was MTV, or maybe it was VH1 playing some old videos. Maybe it was VH1 because they used to do a lot of like 80s segments and those type of things. And one of the VJs I remember was saying, we're going to play something from Flock of Seagulls, and, coming at you here with this video, Iran by Flock of Seagulls. And I was like, Iran? Like, why would they write a song about Iran, like the country? I was super confused. And it was like, maybe it's like a political song. Like maybe it's like, because, I kind of knew at that point that there was like some strife in the 80s, with the Ayatollah and with all, there was all kinds of stuff going on in the 80s in Iran that made it very historical, very newsworthy. So I was like, okay, I guess they wrote a song about Iran, and I apparently was a hit because they were about to play the video. And then it came on, and pretty much had to get into the chorus till it was like, oh, I ran. I
right.
ran.
Yeah.
So far away. Right. So, that was my introduction to these guys. Just very, it's like their follow-up single, Saudi Arabia,
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or,
exactly.
You get further into the deep cuts of the record, and, you come across a Gaza Strip, or whatever. But anyway, honestly, that's kind of, I didn't really study much of this group. And in fact, when you said that we're doing an episode on it, I was, and still am a little intrigued as to why. So I'm looking forward certainly to, digging into this one and hearing your thoughts on it. So, that's my unwondrous Flock of Seagulls story. How about you, Nub?
So for me, it goes back to a TV show from the mid 2000s. I think quite short lived, but really a fantastic idea for a TV show. And that is a show called Bands Reunited. I don't know if you ever watched this, but it basically took seemingly mostly 80s, but I think some 70s groups. And it had this dude who was kind of charismatic and entertaining. And his job was to fly around the country and reunite bands that had disbanded. And so I watched the show a couple of times and I was like, okay. And one of the episodes was he reunited A Flock of Seagulls and in the original lineup. And it was one of those things where before then I had heard Iran and knew the video and kind of the same thing you were talking about. But once I watched the show, they used more clips from different songs. And one of the clips they played was from Space Age Love Song. And actually at the end, when they reunite, they play Iran and then they go kind of out of the episode playing Space Age Love Song live. And I was like, oh, like I need to find out more about this. Cause I was into synth pop and we mentioned the Gary Newman thing, but this was later. I mean, this was like the mid 2000s. I was already, well in my 20s. And so it was sort of a relatively new discovery. I'm just like you, T. I don't recall growing up a lot knowing about this group, but that Bands Reunited was fascinating. You learned that, the two guys were brothers and Paul Reynolds on guitar. He had like a lot of, I think he had some stage fright and like, he was a really shy guy. And the bass player was this really funny kind of, entertaining guy, Frank Maudsley. And so they got all these guys together and they decided to do this gig and reunite. And it was kind of a warm, kind of a touching story actually to see this group get back together and play for the first time in decades. And it was a great episode. And that kind of started the intrigue, and then bought the album and got more into the catalog. And that was kind of it. So this is one of those rare things where a TV show actually kind of led to it. And anyone who wants to watch it, it is on YouTube. Just search Bands Reunited, Flock of Seagulls, and you can find it. And it's a very cool thing to watch. It was a neat show and a great idea. So
why didn't you tell me that before this episode? I mean, it would have been, as the great Happy Gilmore once said, where were you on that one, dipshit?
What do you mean? You can't do your own research?
I mean, I just, I would have checked it out before during my research,
Well, check it out post episode, because I think you'll like it. It's a really cool story. So
we'll do, buddy.
Yeah. So, that's a wonder story for Flock of Seagulls. So, all right, T, let's prove that this band is no one hit wonder and that there are a lot more. So you ready to get into it, T? Ready to drop the needle?
Let's go.
All right, let's drop the needle on A Flock of Seagulls. Here we go. All right, well, hey, you're going to be a one-hit wonder. You might as well front load the album with your hit. And we're going through the U.S. track listing of A Flock of Seagulls, which, of course, starts with I Ran So Far Away. So, the guy had the hair and, you got the long synth intro and all those things. But honestly, T, what stood out to me more than anything else with this song is the guitar and the crafty use of the guitar and the tone.
Right.
That mixed with the synthesizers and the electronic drums and just that really sonic sound.
Yeah.
But right off the bat, you're just like, who is playing that guitar and why have I never heard of him before? Because what a crafty, creative part and what an amazing tone.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Great delay and usage of the time delay. I mean, you can see right away during the first minute of the deal why the production of this record was so adored, because the layering taking place there. I mean, those synth parts are just perfect, and it really builds nicely. I know that the hook is really key and, and a lot of what is remembered as part of the song. But the way that first couple minutes of just synth intro and the way it kind of builds toward these verses, which are great, just a little haunting, just great verses that lead into a really memorable chorus. It's a hell of a song.
And the whole damn song is a hook. I mean, the verse is a hook. When you think about, count the hooks, right? We've done this before. The never thought I'd meet a girl like you is a hook. Meet a girl like you, hook. And I ran, hook. And then I had to get away to hook. I mean, it's like the song is just packed with memorable hooks,
100%. And this was something you did at the time, that you knew that you needed a heater on the deal, and you go and, jam a bunch of hooks and a bunch of layers into a track. And, it certainly they did not save this for 2 or 3. They wanted to come right out of the gate here with what ended up being not just an 80s heater, but a classic song that, that still lives alive and well, very much so today.
And we've talked about kind of the role of the guitar solo in songs. And, there's Yngwie Malmsteen, and there's Steve Lukather from Toto. But the role of the guitar solo in this song is just so perfect. And it's just kind of screaming in its simplicity, and it's not overstated, and he's not shredding. Paul Reynolds didn't shred or anything, but there was just something about the way he played, and especially in this solo, when it climbs at the end and builds back into that last verse. I mean, it's kind of magical,
Yeah, no question. It all works on Iran. There's a lot going on, a lot of layers, a lot of different parts kind of merging together, but it all works.
Well, I think it continues to work on track 2. And wow, I'm just going to say one of my favorite songs of all time. Track 2, Space Age Love Song. I mean, just hearing it again, listen to this song a million times in my life, it still like gives me chills. This song is so emotional for something that's so driven by machines. It's electronic drums, it's synthesizers, you got heavily treated guitar, but there is something so human about this song. And does it have the same effect on you? I mean, this song, like, it's like moving for me. I don't know, man.
Yeah. No, I mean, you mentioned it when we were talking about mixtapes, during the Q&A, that this was a strong mixtape favorite for you. And I see why, it's a fun song, but very emotional, and musically, and lyrically, I think. I'm a huge Angels and Airwaves fan. I think the stuff that Tom DeLonge has done with that project and you got to give it up for Ilan Rubin too, is remarkable. And it's basically this song. And
super influenced. It's an amazing call. You're totally right.
Yeah. And they just basically like took this song and have made like 6 albums out of it. But
have they ever cited A Flock of Seagulls as an influence? Because I'm telling you, it's a great call. The comparison is pretty uncanny.
I'm sure Tom's really good at doing that. He's never been one to lack appreciation and, praise for those that have influenced, the particularly the Angels and Airwaves project, which was something that was very experimental. I know that he's mentioned, U2 and some other contributors toward that. He should include these guys, because they've put together some very good original work, but this was in a way that delayed guitar and the synth treatments that complement it. You hadn't really heard that, or you hadn't really heard it produced in such a way where it kind of came across the way this does. And I agree, it's a beautiful track. And boy, coming out hot with Iran, not the country, and Space Age Love Song right on top of it. I mean, shoot, that's almost, I almost think they maybe should have separated these out a little bit because
Spread the wealth. Yeah.
Well, how the hell do you like maintain that moment? I mean, that's like, a team coming out and like hitting their first 7 threes of the game and only being up like by 3. It's like, oh man, like, how are they going to maintain this? So, I mean, they're just burying them from the corner here in the first 2 tracks of this record, the first, 9 minutes. And boy, people must have gotten through this and maybe it was hard to go just flip back and restart it because you want to hear those 2 songs again. But they definitely put the pressure on themselves in these last, 8 tracks to sustain this. But man, that is coming out about as hot as you can for a track 1 and a track 2, not just in pop, not just in 80s, but in all records ever.
Oh, dude,
that
it's
is
like
hot.
this is gonna be the best album ever. Like there are 2 things to dissect. I think that again, like Iran, it's I think it's the emotion comes from the guitar, and you've that section with the dee 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 dee, and then when it climbs,
it's ridiculous.
Again,
it's so good.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah.
This band just found a way to like take melodies and then elevate them and then elevate them again. And that builds towards the outro too. And when the outro kind of gets that kind of thing at the end with the build-ups and then it just ends beautifully on this last note. I mean, it's kind of the perfect song. And see, I'm going to make the call. I'm going to say Dolly Willy rule on this one, buddy. I mean, to me, any genre, any style, any voice could probably take Space Age Love Song and make a hit out of it. What do you think? Can we go with the Dolly Parton, Willie Nelson rule that Dolly and Willie could have made a hit out of this song? It's high praise on 2 Twins in an Album. What do you think?
Well, are you talking like Willie with like an acoustic guitar? Or are you talking like Willie singing over the backtrack?
So that's a good question. No, definitely not Willie singing over the bad track. I'm thinking Willie, acoustic guitar and some light drums behind it, doing more of a slowed down version of it.
Maybe. I mean, I don't think it's like a genius composition of a song. I think it's just recorded extremely well and produced extremely well and layered extremely well. So I don't know. I don't know if the rule would apply in that case. Now, you could have anybody sing over this backtrack and it'll be good because the musicality of it is just so amazing. But I'm not sure. That's one I might have to disagree with you on because I think this song is probably more about the layered production than it is it being a brilliantly composed song or a brilliantly vocalized song. So
okay, all right. I think you make a strong argument. I still would like to hear that. Saw your eyes.
Oh, it'd be great to hear.
Made me smile. Just hear Willie.
Yeah.
What about Dolly? Could kill it though. Now Dolly could sing it right over the back.
Dolly would kill it, and Willie would be so high. Who never know the difference.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, it's quite the 1-2 punch. I don't know that an opening 2-song run gets a whole lot better than that, T. But one of the things that I do want to think about here is how many 80s songs had the word love in the title? It's like, I think out of all the decades of music, I'm guessing that the 80s had the most songs, certainly the most hit songs with the word love in it. And so
had to.
Right? I mean, don't you think? So I was wondering, what would you say? We haven't done a top 5 in a little while, right? So what would you say is your top 5 songs of the 80s with the word love in the title? And I'm not going to include Space Age Love Song because it's very obvious that would probably be my number 1. So let's just get that out of the way. So I'm not going to let you include it either.
Okay.
But let's say the other top 5 songs of the 80s with the word love in the title, and let's alternate back and forth. So why don't you go first? So
full transparency, we did discuss this in advance because, this is one of those questions that takes a little bit of research. So with that, I will declare that coming up with 5 was just absurd. Shame on you for limiting it to 5. There's no freaking way I could get this down to 5. So I do have 8.5. If that's if you can check with the judges again, but there's no freaking way. I mean, I could go 5 and 3.5 honorable mentions if you'd like the cosmetics of that better, but there's no way I could get this down to 5, buddy.
Okay, let me check with the judges because I'm not, I don't know about this one. Okay, judges are saying a top 5 with 3 honorable mentions is fine, but you got to get it down to 5. That's the whole point, Come on, man,
All right. Well, I appreciate that.
Don't appreciate it's the judges.
Yeah,
our judges table is very active.
They're 2 for 2 tonight.
They are certainly. So, all right, let's go with your first one. What do you got?
Well, this is a pretty obvious one. This is Your Love, by the Outfield Canadian group, and probably properly argued a one-hit wonder. But that one's kind of a no-brainer. What's your first?
First of all, great choice. I love, pun intended, Your Love by the Outfield. But my first one is going to be from 1980, and that is Love Will Tear Us Apart by Joy Division.
Oh, yeah, sure. Right?
Classic song.
Absolutely.
All right, what do you got next to you?
Well, let's go little David Foster on this one, right? I mean, there's no way he doesn't crack his way onto this list, of 80s song with love in it. I mean, come on. But this is 1986 off of the album 18. All right. And this is Will You Still Love Me for the Rest of My Life? I got a lot of love and I don't want to let go. Will you still love me for the rest of my life? 'Cause I can't go on. No, I can't go on. I can't go on if I'm on my own. Oh, God, I'm crying. Now I'm crying.
That's my favorite Chicago song. And it was on my list. I'm not going to say it now because I don't want to double up, but that was on my list. Will You Still Love Me by Chicago? That is honestly my favorite Chicago song. And amazing trivia question. Lead vocalist, Jason Scheff. He was brand new in the band. He's the dude who took over for Peter Cetera on bass. And they're like, here, dude, you get to sing this song. And it ended up being the biggest hit on the album. So there you go.
Great call.
All right. Well, we're going to say that one is for both of us too, because I absolutely adore that song for sure.
Oh.
All right. Next one for me is from 1986 as well. Big year for love, I guess. And that is Higher Love by Steve Winwood. Now I want to make sure you know that that's the album version, not the radio edit. Okay. I want the full album version. I want the long intro, the long outro. I want the full middle section with that whole thing.
Yep.
Don't give me that stupid radio edit that squeeze it down to like 3.5 minutes. I want the full on album version.
You want large breads.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
But Higher Love by Steve Winwood. Come on. I mean,
that'd
get much better. All right, T, what's your next?
Well, I'm going to go to 1982 here, and a little something brought to you by a good man named Jeff Osborne. This is On the Wings of Love, watching the two of us together flying high above the wings of love. Let's do the middle part. 'Cause you were meant for me. I'm yours exclusively. Jeffrey Osborne. So George Duke played on that song. He also produced it.
Legend. Absolutely.
Part of what makes it great. Michael Sembello, who's a maniac, in case you didn't know, played guitar on that song. So, you had kind of a strong personnel on that one. And Jeffrey Osborne, On the Wings of Love.
Yeah, I love that choice.
Well, I should say you do.
And what year was that one, T, again? I know you said it.
That was 82.
Okay, we're going to stay in 1982. And all I need to say about this one is just toot, 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 toot. And that would be Love.
Oh, so good. I have that one too. Great call.
Psychedelic
Oh, that song is so good, man. Like the outro. Oh man, that is so good. That is such a great song.
The outro is killer, but the low end of the chorus is like, and the drums like going to this like thing on the toms, like it's just really well done. It's a
great pick. I actually was thinking when I picked that one as well, I was like, I think I'm going to get him here. I think this is going to be one of those that I'm going to pick and he's going to be like, oh, that is a great frickin' song. But you're all over it. Good for you.
T, what do you got next?
1983. That is Love is a Battlefield. Pat Benatar. I think this song is so good. The whole like atmosphere of it, super well written, well produced. Obviously, Neil Giraldo nor Pat Benatar wrote it. It was a Mike Chapman song. So, I mean, this is one that came from the pros, but I don't know how much you love. I mean, obviously we cover this song. So, it's something that we've always, I think, both thought pretty highly of. But yeah, this makes top 5 for me. I Love is a Battlefield is strong.
I always thought it was okay. I definitely didn't like it as much as you did. But I mean, probably one of the better Benatar songs, but that's not saying a whole lot, right? Because I don't know how many good ones there were. I know you liked We Belong To. I know that you were a big fan of that.
There goes the upcoming Pat Benatar episode I was planning.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right. Well, let's go to 1983. And this would be some that, again, some people might incorrectly cite as a one-hit wonder, and he was not. But that would be Howard Jones with What Is Love?
Okay, Hojo, always a good choice.
Produced by Rupert Hine, and Howard Jones, one of the great, synthesizer kind of one man does it all type of art.
Rupert Holmes produced that? Rupert Holmes. Wow. Who knew?
Rupert Hine. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a little difference there. Yeah. All right, T, let me check my abacus. Okay, I'm showing one left for,
I've got 3. So can I just go?
Just say them all.
Well, I'm going with 1986. Is it okay to double down on David Foster? Is that all right? It feels a little weird, but
I mean, the guy is a world-class dick, but yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah. So this is Glory of Love, Karate Kid 2.
Oh, Satara.
Yeah. Satara, which, I mean, wow. I love this song. I think this song is held up so well, as most, I mean, David Foster's a pretty interesting, I would agree with you, rather arrogant, interesting cat. But there is no question he knew how to put together a song, and he put together a great one here for Karate Kid 2, Glory of Love, Peter Cetera. Nubs, what do you got? What's your last one?
I need a calculator to figure out, did David Foster have more Grammys or more wives?
Hey, very nice.
There you go. All right, last one for me. Let's go to 1988 and an album called OU812. And the song is When It's Love by Van Halen. How does it get any better?
Yeah, When It's Love. Great choice. Great Van Hagar there.
All right. So what you've... Okay, so like you have honorable mentions now that you got to give?
I do have 2 that I
all right, just quickly. The judges are getting very antsy over here, so please.
The first is O L'Amour.
Okay. All right. I got it. Yeah.
Right?
We're counting French.
En français, amour means love, does it not?
Okay. All right. I like it.
And the second is I'm cheating because this is from 1990. Is that okay?
No, it's not okay. That's a 90s song.
Regardless, it's Stevie B, Because I Love You, the Postman song. One of my all-time favorites.
I mean, what an incredible list that comes to a thunderous crash.
How dare you?
By you
How dare you?
Picking a song from 1990, and it happens to be by Stevie B, and it's the Postman song. But you know what? See, we're gonna go with it because I know what that song means to you. So I don't want to remove it from your list.
I mean, come on. Because I love you, and I'll do anything. I give you my heart, my everything. Because I love you, I'll be right by your side. Oh, God. I mean, come on. Seriously, Nub? You're not down with this?
I'm speacehless.
You
completely
actually made
speechless.
fun of me for this. I mean, shame on you. Just listen to it. Just listen. I mean,
It's 1990 T. Rules are rules.
isn't it kind of close enough? Like if you on the curve, it's still sort of 80s.
This ain't non-smoky. Rules are rules.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was a good list, T. That was. It does go to show you, right? Like how many 80s hits had the word love in it. So it was the decade of love, if you will.
Oh, what song are we on?
Yeah, right. Exactly. We're on track 3.
Are we on track 2? Yeah.
All right. Let's continue on with the album. Track 3, after the incredible 1-2 punch, continues with You Can Run.
Your peace of mind today. You can run, oh you can run. You can run, oh you can hide. You can run, oh you can run. You can.
It's quite 80s. Got a nice little drive to it. Good little driving song. What do you think of You Can Run?
Very Newman-esque. You know, there's some of that going on here. Vocally and with the synth work and those type of things. Yeah, it is a nice driving track 3, certainly. Bit more up tempo, a bit less atmospheric, you know, more kind of straight driving pop. It's good.
Yeah, the middle album definitely settles into, you know, a little bit more of that pounding groove, if you will. And it continues with Don't Ask Me, track 4. Some good bass on this album, don't you think, T? I mean, and there's a lot of synth going on too, so sometimes it's hard to tell what's bass guitar and what's bass synth. But you know, I think Frank Maudsley and Mike Score have a nice little complimentary thing going on.
Yeah, it's got a nice chop to it. You know, it's quick and snappy. I mean, these, you know, track 4, track 5, and track 6 are all sub 3 minutes. So, you know, they're getting after it pretty good and pretty to the point. I do like the efficiency of this album. It's, you know, 10 tracks and songs that aren't drawn out for the sake of it.
I like the idea of efficiency. I think that's true. You know, there's not a lot of waste going on here. And there's not a ton of like over tracking either. You know, each member, you can really pick out the voice of each member in terms of them playing their instrument. And as we mentioned, a really crystal clear sounding production. So side 1 concludes with Messages. So T, in the mid 2000s, there was this whole throwback sound to this type of music. Franz Ferdinand and Radio 4 and the Strokes and some of these bands. And like, can't you hear that in Messages? Kind of that offbeat hi-hat thing and the big loud, like,
yeah, it was kind of like what you were hearing from like Madness and from Men at Work and some of those, you know, kind of groups around the same time that were a bit more kind of unique from a pop sensibility standpoint that brings in some rhythmic things. So yeah, I think this is a pretty new wavy track, pretty unique when you put it in the context of all 10 tracks. Messages is kind of a neat way to close up the first side.
Flip the record over and kick off side 2 with the song that I think the band would tell you is actually the track that they thought was going to be not just the lead single, but the biggest hit on the album. And you could sort of see why. I Ran is a very unconventional hit single. Telecommunication is something that sounded more like it was intended to be a hit single. So let's kick off side 2 with that, Telecommunication. everything locked in nicely there. Again, I think you got terrific performance from Paul Reynolds. Remember, this is the song produced by Bill Nelson. You can sort of hear that just in the textures and everything. It almost sounds a little Bebop Deluxe-ish. But I don't know, T. Do you think this is one of those that maybe should have been a bigger hit?
I think it's very good. I'm not sure, it's very repetitive from a hook standpoint. So it really didn't, I don't think, scream radio hit around that time, but it's a really good album track. And there's some good kind of sweeping actions taking place with the synth and with some different rhythmic things that are really nice. So, I think it gets a little hypnotic with the chorus of kind of telecommunication over and over again. And that probably kept it a little bit from being something that you could kind of hook and sing along to, which was more of the kind of idea back here in the front half of the 80s. But it's a great kickoff to side 2 and yeah, really, really strong track on the record. I really like what they're doing musically in a lot of areas of telecommunication for sure.
Track 7 is interesting because on the UK release and some of the other worldwide releases, it's the opening track. And actually, if you ever see Flock of Seagulls, which I'm lucky enough that I have, it's always the opening track at the show. And you can sort of see why when you're listening to it. And that is Modern Love is Automatic. It's a killer show opener. It really is. And pretty good little album opener if you're looking at that other track listing. But this song kind of has the drama and it builds and builds and builds. And by the end, Mike Score is singing, with a lot of passion in his voice. And again, just the way this band was able to take a lot of kind of more metallic sounds and make them really tangible and make them really human, I think is what stands out. But it really works well as an album opener. I'm sure there was some conflict on whether to keep this as the opener or go ahead and open with Iran, but this is an album that's almost cursed with 2 true opening tracks on it.
Yeah, I definitely see that. It is a nice show opener. I mean, it's one of the better guitar tracks on the record. There's a lot going on there with some palm mute stuff and some chop stuff that really adds a very nice dynamic to it. And then obviously, there's kind of that main part in between vocal segments that provides you with kind of that lead melody. So yeah, it's a nice guitar track, and I didn't know that about opening the shows with it, but it certainly makes sense
for sure. And the album continues here on side 2 with track 8, Standing in the Doorway. Yeah, again, man, it's just the guitar. I mean, it's such an underrated guitar album, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. I didn't realize it until, going track by track on it for this purpose, but it really is a good guitar record. You don't think it, but getting and I think that's part of what Phil Spector and others that have that production mindset liked about it is oftentimes, especially around this time, getting the guitar to kind of work together with all these different elements could be difficult. And if you did it wrong, it would sound like you're kind of forcing something into the mix. Whereas here, they were able to take these guitar parts and either structure them in certain ways or play them in certain ways that either made them kind of a chop to accompany a certain beat or a delay pattern to kind of accompany a certain synth route. They just were very smart about getting this guitar effect and these parts to really help the remainder of what was taking place. Because frankly, if this was synth only, it would still be pretty cool. And if it was guitar only, it would be pretty cool too. But getting all those things to kind of, it's like pieces of a puzzle to kind of all work together. They made it look pretty easy on this record, and Standing in the Doorway is a good example of that. But that's not really particularly easy. That takes a lot of thoughtfulness from a composition standpoint and certainly a production standpoint. I think that's why you saw a lot of the acclaim from a lot of different, not critics, but actual music producers that know what the hell they're doing that gave this a lot of praise.
And it just gave so much space to the sound as well. Because to your point, nobody's doing something that the other player is doing. Everything complements and everything is sort of adjacent to what their fellow musician in the band is doing. That created a really open, spacious sound. I think that's why people love it. So speaking of why people love it, I'll ask you, T, did DNA deserve the Grammy, or should they have given the Grammy back now?
Nice.
Yeah, exactly. But you're sort of buried on side 2 in this album is the Grammy Award winner for Best Instrumental Performance, and that is DNA. All right, see, what do you think? Grammy worthy?
It's really cool. I mean, it's really cool. And it holds up tremendously well.
Yeah.
This is, even if you're not necessarily into more of a proggy, synthy, poppy type sound, this is something you pop on today, and it's like, if somebody were to go in their basement and DIY a track like this out, you'd be like, man, that's really good. So yeah, I think it was deserved. I think, at that time, boy, do I miss these days when bands like this actually were awarded and acclaimed and all that. But it's very cool that they got it for a 2.5 minute instrumental that, is the second to last track on the record. I would guess they wouldn't be expecting that, but yeah, they put together something really nice here that even all these years later holds up well. You think they deserve the Grammy?
I do. Yeah. I think it's a hell of a composition. It's got great flow, pretty outstanding atmosphere. I got to tell you, T, I have such warm memories of this song. Literally. I think we've mentioned it before on the podcast, but, I taught 8th grade English, and one of the writing exercises we did, we called it a sound review. And that is that every Wednesday, which was sound review day, I would play for the students a different instrumental song, and they would write to it, and they would write, the imagery that song brought up. And it was a great writing exercise, but it was also so much fun to, expose these students to all kinds of music. And
so you were like the coolest teacher ever by essentially what you're saying, right?
Well, you know what, man? Like, I introduced so many young 8th grade students to Brian Eno and Rush and, just stuff that they, students will still write me today and say, oh, I would have never listened to David Bowie if you hadn't have played, Warsaw in class. And,
that's called doing the Lord's work, buddy.
Right. And so, DNA was part of the sound review series, and it was near the end of the year. It was like one of the last 3 or 4 that we did. And I remember because the week before we did Tubular Bells part 1, and I built it up the whole year. Like, we're going to do Tubular, and it was 24 minutes, and they wrote for 24 minutes to the whole Tubular Bells thing. And the stuff they wrote was incredible. And the week after that, nice. it was spring, and it was warm out, and the sun was always shining, and we would do DNA. And it was just a fun day. It was, we're doing DNA today. Great.
Yeah.
And the students would always write nice flowery things to it because it was late in the school year and everyone was eating food. And And I always think about that every time I hear it.
That's cool. That's awesome.
For sure. So that brings us close to the close with track 10. And that is the closing track on A Flock of Seagulls. And this is Man Made. Nice dramatic closer. It reminds me a lot of Vienna by Ultravox. Just even the drum pattern, I think this came out before the Vienna album, but it's sort of eerily similar to that amazing song from Ultravox. But Man Made brings the album to a close. What do you think of the way it closes?
It's cool. It's the longest song on the record and really pulls it all together as far as a lot of the different elements, some great percussive stuff going on. Again, it's just a record all about layering and all about making multiple layers and multiple sounds in some cases that are sort of leaning in different directions, all work together. Man-Made does that really well.
All right, T. Well, let's get into a little analysis here as we look at A Flock of Seagulls. And we'll start with the simple question. Does it matter? T, what do you think? Does this album matter?
I don't know that it does. I mean, clearly this band was known for this record, but really I think they were just known for the first two songs, more than anything. And they're dynamite songs and they're the type of songs where, a band should be known for multi-decades for creating because they're classics and they'll probably live on forever and deservingly so. I don't hear a lot about this record being terribly influential. I mean, you probably should more. And maybe when you get outside of the US, it is mentioned more in those circles. Clearly the praise that you hear from Spectre and from some others, from the kind of standpoint of appreciation for the way it was put together is notable. So I think it's one of those that probably, did matter quite a bit within certain circles. And it almost seems like maybe it was kind of a musician's type album, even back in those days of one where if you were able to kind of appreciate the layered nature and some of the production elements, and certainly there's some great songs on it too. I mean, I'm not discounting the composition, but this record's really as much about the sound as it is having just extraordinary songs once you get past the first two. So, I think again, you get through track 1 and track 2 and you think you're about to hear like the greatest album ever made, and the rest of it's pretty good. But I think it's tough to sustain that kind of energy. Tracks 3 through 10, they did a good job of it. They created something that I think mattered for a lot of music types and a lot of musicians, I would guess. But critically, you don't hear about this record a lot, and maybe you should hear about it a little bit more. But I don't know that it really mattered or even sticks out within kind of 80s pop critical review, probably the way it should. So I would say probably not really, but boy, you got a couple tracks there that'll live on forever. And that says something, in of itself. So what do you think, Nub, on Did It Matter for Flock of Seagulls here?
I think creatively it matters in a number of ways. Number one, I will tell you, I think it holds up extremely well for an 80s album. I mean,
oh yeah, it does.
How many 80s albums do you go back and listen to? You think, I have a hard time getting over the keyboard sound, or the drum sound is mushy, or the vocal production is over processed or under processed.
Yeah.
This album just sounds so fresh.
Yeah, it's a great point.
And that gives it a unique part in 80s pop music. Cause I think that I really believe that as somebody in 2021 can listen to it and go, oh, that's quite good. That's quite interesting. And that sounds like something I can enjoy today without the caveat of, oh, that's 80s or anything like that. So I think creatively, there's a lot of aspects of it that matter. I don't think commercially it has a lot of importance, because there was just so much music during this time and so many hits, and the little exercise we did with the love thing, it shows you. I mean, the 80s was saturated with tremendous, tremendous songs and albums. And so I don't know that like it's got a huge commercial place like mainstream, but I agree that musicians and artistically inclined people who want to reach back and find something that isn't overly analyzed too. I think that's one of the advantages of this record is it's not over-explained. It's not over-examined. You can discover it and feel kind of like, oh, that's cool. That's different. And it's not like something that everybody knows. And we all know that there's some appeal in that for people, that if you kind of discover something that's a little bit of a secret, and this album is a little bit of a secret more than it should be, because I think it goes back to the beginning with that one hit wonder unfair status that we talked about. So, all right, T, let's go with the final cut for A Flock of Seagulls. So, T, is A Flock of Seagulls on the turntable? Is it in the collection? Is it collecting dust? Or is it in the for sale bin? T, where's A Flock of Seagulls for you?
a real tweener here for me. So you cannot put this in the for sale bin just based on the first 2 songs. You just can't. I mean, they're just too good. I'm hesitant to put it in the collection just because, it's tough. Tracks 3 through 10. I mean, there's some great moments, but it's tough to keep up the expectation and the pace that you get on the first 2. Some of it does start to sound a little bit the same. Now, if you just really kind of get your ear into it and dig into some of the complexities of the different layers and different parts, you realize that it's more creative than it sounds at times. But if you're kind of casually listening, there are moments where it all starts to bleed together a little bit. I'm going to go Collecting Dust, kind of for that reason. It's very close for me for being in the collection because I do think it's one of the better 80s records, out there. And it came from kind of the early front half where the production really stands out because it sounds like, to your point, it sounds like an album that could have been made 5 years ago, let alone an album that could have been made in like the late 80s or early 90s. Like this is made in 1983. This is before a lot of these production tricks and techniques had really, sort of materialized. And they were the first to kind of capture a lot of this stuff. So mad respect for that. It was very close for me for being in the collection, but I'm going to go Collecting Dust just because if you get to tracks 3 through 10, it becomes really hard to sort of continue that ride. But there's no way you put this in the for sale bin. Based on the respect for the production and the overall sound concept and the first 2 tracks. I mean, goodness. So where do you got it, Nub? I'm interested. Final cut.
I've got it on the turntable, but maybe not for the reasons you might think. It's not because it's so complete. First of all, it does have 3 or 4 of the best songs of the era. And with Space Age Love Song, in my opinion, maybe even the best song of the era. So that gives it a tremendous amount of ability to enjoy it, right? But the reality is that the biggest strength of this album is that there isn't one thing on it that was overplayed. And you can't say that for a lot of things from the 80s. Like if you throw on Duran Duran Rio, it's hard to still take the song Rio seriously. It's used in every 80s documentary and, but this album was not overplayed. Even Iran, it really wasn't. It wasn't one of those type of hit singles. It was a little more off the beaten path and just a hair more obscure for us growing up. And so the thing I love about the album and why it's on the turntable is its peaks are pretty incredible. And you can listen to them frequently because you haven't heard them to death, and that's, again, like we said in the analysis, it's like, it's still kind of a little secret. This album, it's still something that hasn't been abused to death by the mainstream. And so therefore you can enjoy it more and more top to bottom. And that's why it's on the turntable for me. It's more about its freshness than its completeness. And the album remains incredibly fresh and very vibrant for sure. All right, T. Well, listen, fun to go through that. And we talked about one-hit wonders. So let's see if there's any true one-hit wonders in your head as we look at what is in your head. Well, we're not going to get Dolores twice. Oh, there. Okay. All right, just want to make sure. All right, T. Yeah, there you go. All right, 3 songs, T. What do you got?
The first is by the Bee Gees, but this is not 70s Bee Gees. This is 80s Bee Gees. You Win Again. Great track. Probably one of my top 10, 15, I would say for sure. Songs of the 80s.
Great. You're a true champion for that song.
Great pop Bee Gees. Oh, I love it. I love it. Great lip sync performance at the American Music Awards too, which we had on VHS. And you always wanted to fast forward the Bee Gees doing You Win Again. I was like, no, leave it. I like this song. You're like, this sucks. I'm like, no, it doesn't. The second is I've been on a kind of a nice streak of love ballads here. This is also 80s, and this is Melissa Manchester doing a little Don't Cry Out Loud, Come on.
Wait, is that the Don't Cry Out
Just keep it inside. Don't let it hide your feelings. Fly high above. A lot of singing this episode.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, come on. It's a great track. I do like some Melissa Manchester. You should hear how she talks about you.
It's a real jam.
Oh, God.
Real
Great,
jam.
great song. And then the third, we're going to go with Nickelback here doing Lullaby, which is beautiful song, one of their best. And, always good to pull out when you're kind of wanting to feel it a little bit, because that's we've talked about emotion a lot on this episode. I think that's a track that's got quite a bit of it. Anyone who tries to claim that Nickelback is staticky and formulaic and unemotional, just listen to Lullaby. So there's my pro Nickelback statement for episode 34 on the deal here. So what do you got now?
I've got On the Backs of Angels by Dream Theater, a band that I'm sort of in a rediscovery phase of. And this was the first track they did without Mike Portnoy on drums. And it's been a rather mixed bag from Dream Theater since he left the band. And that would be considered one of the high points for sure. Last Night on Earth by U2 off the Pop album, 1997. One of the great singles from that really overlooked album. And in my opinion, my favorite of all U2 albums.
Well, as you've made clear on the old podcast here, U2, you're very picky about it. So I'll take from this that Pop was your pro Pop in the Nubs picky YouTube catalog.
Oh, Pop is to me their best album by far. And those who hate on it, they can I got no place for them really. But yeah, I love Pop.
They can bite you. Is that what you're about to say?
That's right. Exactly. So yes, I am very pro Pop for sure. And I'm also pro Ryan Adams. And it's good that he's come back and recorded a new album. Not crazy about the new album, but I still love the album Cold Roses and the song If I Am a Stranger.
Yeah, I'm sure it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, you still don't get the whole Ryan Adams thing.
Sure, it's a real classic. Yeah.
All right. Well, that is what is in our head. And what's going to be in our head for a while is telecommunication.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. So, T, thanks for your thoughts on A Flock of Seagulls.
Enjoyed it. Always great to pull some 80s love. There you go. Another key theme to this episode. But no, enjoyed talking about it, man.
Love it. And we will see everybody for episode 35. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. We'll see you next time on Two Twins and an Album.
Two twins and an album.
Well, that's about it. That's all we have. I hope it wasn't too disappointing. We will see you on tour. Until then, take it easy.